The Shining is one of the most beloved horror movies of all time, influencing many filmmakers and actors with its incredible direction and acting. But today, we aren't talking about that. Instead, we're going to talk about the sequel. Today, we ask, what is Stephen King's Dr. Sleep?
I don't suppose they told you anything in Denver about the tragedy we had up here during the winter of 1970? Well, a man named Charles Grady is the winter caretaker. And he came up here with his wife and two little girls, I think about 8 and 10. From what I've been told, I mean, he seemed like a completely normal individual. But at some point during the winter, he must have suffered some kind of a complete mental breakdown. He ran amok and killed his family with an axe.
In the fall of 1974, King and his wife Tabitha decided to go out of state so he could write about something that wasn't just Maine. So they went down to Boulder, Colorado and stayed at the Stanley Hotel. Staying in the most famous room of the building, which is said to be extremely haunted, King had a dream about a novel he had scrapped, and slowly the plot of The Shining came to him. A novel about a little boy and his family coming to a hotel that is empty due to the winter. His father, Jack Torrance, is the caretaker of this hotel, and over the course of several weeks, we see that something sinister is in the building that affects the family. This haunt leads to Jack, who himself is a recovering alcoholic, to drink and go on a rampage against his family, ultimately leading to his death and the family's escape. All the while, this little boy, Danny Torrance, deals with the psychic powers that the hotel causes to explode, giving us the iconic line of Red Rum. It's a tale as old as time, The Beauty and the Beast. King's novel became an instant hit and solidified him as a horror novelist and caught the eye of many. One of the people that had his eye caught on The Shining was legendary director Stanley Kubrick.
It might be better to just play it as a medium shot with the situation. The other thing, maybe.
Let's see if I get. Let's take that. Can you do with your head down? Yeah. Well, that's not bad. Let's do that. Try that, Jay.
Wendy, listen to me. Let me out of here and I'll forget the whole damn thing. It'll be like it never happened.
Needing a commercial success after the box office failure that was Barry Lyndon, Kubrick needed something that would capture American audiences and had his team give him a pile of horror novels. According to the Kubrick autobiography, Kubrick's secretary heard the sound of each book hitting the wall as the director flung it into reject pile after reading the first few pages. Finally, one day, the secretary noticed it had been a while since she had heard the thud of another writer's work biting the dust. She walked in to check on her boss and found Kubrick deeply engrossed in reading The Shining. Kubrick changed a lot of the original novel, focusing on a more surreal horror instead of the more family-based horror that the original had, completely changing the ending and several other moments that are in the novel. While the movie is often regarded as one of the best horror movies of all time, when it first came out, it was met with mixed reviews. Many critics criticized it for being slower. Many horrors at the time were the complete opposite of this movie, and drifting far from the source material. King often expresses his distaste for the film since it was so different, taking what he considered the strongest parts and the tone of the novel and changing it so drastically that it's a different thing. King was so dissatisfied with Kubrick's film that he went out of his way to make a new miniseries based on a novel.
Yeah, you can't fight City Hall. Just put the traps down the way he wants is what I do. Besides, every hotel's got rats. I feel like every hotel's got its scandals.
Any ghosts?
Kubrick allowed King to readapt his own novel if King lessened his vocal outcry against Kubrick's film. He went towards ABC since they made adaptations of his own works before, to great reception. The miniseries was closer to the original novel, pretty much being a one-to-one version of the novel with very minor changes. The miniseries aired on ABC in 1997 to decent and very good reviews from critics as they enjoyed how close it was to the source and how creepy the series was. But as the years went on, critical reception went down, criticizing the series as being too much like the source and not really working for the format. While it is perfectly fine as a series, it's too literal of an adaptation to stay interesting.
I'm here with Stephen King, the master of horror, is breaking new ground with his first sequel ever, Dr. Sleep. It brings back Danny Torrance, the little boy with superpowers from The Shining. Stephen, thank you for coming in this morning.
Nice to see you.
Why'd you bring him back?
Because I never forgot him.
So now that we got through the obligatory Shining talk, why does all of this connect to Dr. Sleep? Well, King always thought about The Shining. It haunted him in a way. So when a fan asked him whatever happened to Danny, it got him thinking. While doing a promotional tour for Under the Dome, King described what he thought a sequel for The Shining would be like. Following Danny Torrance from the first novel, now in his 40s, it would show him working at a hospice helping elderly pass on with his abilities. This got people excited, so when King announced there was a poll to see what his next novel was going to be between Dr. Sleep and the next Dark Tower novel, Dr. Sleep won, just beating Dark Tower. September 24th of 2013 rolled around and Dr. Sleep launched and was met with lots of critical praise, calling it a fitting sequel and follow-up to a classic novel. Now, I'm going to talk about the plot to Dr. Sleep. Since it's newer, I'll give a spoiler warning for all of you. Skip 2 if you'd like to not be spoiled on the plot of the movie and novel. For everyone else, here we go. The story stayed almost the same as when King first conceptualized it. Following Danny when he's older working at a hospice helping elderly pass on. But King wanted to expand on that and introduce something new. Opening roughly 3 or so years after The Shining, in 1981, Danny has been silent due to a dramatic event that had happened at the Overlook, and is still haunted by the spirits. So Wendy calls Dick to help. Dick, who knows what Danny is going through, tells him about lockboxes, which allows him to keep any spirits that haunt him under a mental lock and key. Danny, who is currently being haunted by one famous Miss Massey, tries out this ability by locking her in, never being haunted by her ever again. Shortly after, Danny starts talking again and finally begins to become open once more. Following this, the story introduces a character named Snakebite Andy, a 15-year-old girl with the power to make people do whatever she says they will do. And with this character, we are introduced to the concept of True Na, a race of ancient vampires that feed off of steam, which is our inner life force. They look like elderly people that drive around in RVs. King was inspired by the road trips to Florida he takes and sees these groups of old people in RVs driving around, thinking, what if these older groups were these terrifying vampires that feed off of life force? Next, we are awoken to a man with a hangover in the bed that is not his, next to a naked woman he didn't know. This is little Danny Torrance, and his life went downhill since the last time we saw him. He is a drunk, who sleeps around and gets into bar fights. Wendy has died many years ago, and he travels around, being in a place for a few months, working at a hospital as a janitor, then disappearing. When he comes to, he gets dressed and is ready to leave, remembering details about the prior night, getting drugs and in a bar fight while meeting this girl. He looks at the living room table full of drugs and realizes he has no money, so he takes the girl's wallet and takes the money from it, but leaves the food stamps. He finds out that the girl has a son who mistakes the drugs for candy, or as he calls it, canny, stopping him from taking it and putting the child in the room with his mom. This entire event haunts him for the rest of his life, as when he leaves, he uses the money to buy more booze and a bus ticket. This winds him up in Fraser, New Hampshire, a small town famous for an even smaller town named Teeny Town. It's here where he meets Billy, who gives him a job at the municipal department on one condition: he must quit drinking and join Alcoholics Anonymous. While this happens a few towns away, a little girl is born with a special gift, one that shines. This little girl's name is Abra Stone. Clearly has the same power as Dan, doing things as predicting 9/11, playing a Beatles song on piano, and playing The Simpsons on the TV. While Dan gets better, he goes to every AA meeting and gets a job at a hospice, eventually even living there. He works with a cat named Azzy, who seemingly can guess when people are about to die. Eventually, he works with this cat and helps the elderly pass on, gaining the name Dr. Sleep. Years later, Dan is older and used to his life, being a sober man that helps people pass on, and Abra is a growing little girl who is super smart and loves her powers. These two eventually connect up using the shine, much like Dick Halloran and Danny did in the Overlook, talking through a chalkboard in Dan's room. One day, the True Knot does what the True Knot do, and hunts a young baseball player with a high-level esteem, so high he becomes a baseball prodigy. His name is Bradley Trevor, and he's about to make a couple of new friends. Abra accidentally witnesses this, tapping into their leader, Rose the Hat's mind, watching through her eyes. This alerts the True Knot to Abra and to the power of her steam. This forces her to reach out to Dan, saying they killed the baseball boy, and they start to talk more, having Dan bring Tony towards her so they become friends. 2 years later, the True Knot has a problem. Bradley Trevor had the measles and is affecting them, slowly killing them. This forces Rose to hatch a plan to kidnap Abra and use her steam to save them. Abra learns this and meets Dan for the first time, requesting his help to find Bradley's body to find them, since one of the True Knot touched the baseball glove, letting Abra create a connection to them. So Abra introduces Dan to her dad and Abra's doctor, John Dalton, that Dan has known ever since he started AA. Abra's dad is obviously upset that his daughter has been talking to a random man, but explaining everything, he starts to reluctantly calm down. Eventually, they go down to where the body is buried and get the baseball glove. They return and hatch a plan, ambush the True Knot at the picnic section of Teeny Town. Abra projects being there and tricks the True Knot, allowing Dan, Dave, and John to attack them and kill them, getting some info from them. Unfortunately, Crow Daddy, another leader of the True Knot, kidnaps Abra and starts to drive them. The gang finding this out clearly makes them angry. Dan and Abra mentally switch places and using their combined powers kill Crow in upstate New York. The next morning, Dan meets Abra at a motel, and her, Billy, Dan, and John all hatch a plan to finally end this. They bait Rose into going to the camping ground where the Overlook once stood and agreed to finally meet. On the way down, Dan teaches Abra about lockboxes and the horrors of the Overlook. There, Dan slowly kills the members of the True Knot using Abra's recently deceased great-grandmother's steam, finally meeting the leader herself, Rose the Hat. Using their combined powers, Dan and Abra fight hard to take her down, eventually ending up at an observation point. With the added help of Mr. Jack Torrance, they defeat the evil. Now that the True Knot is finally dead, they can relax and enjoy life. Years later, on Abra's 15th birthday, Dan has become a closer uncle after finding out that he actually is her uncle. They have lived a great life. The novel ends with the family coming together, ready for a new day.
I first saw The Shining, I was probably in 5th grade, 6th grade, saw it on VHS at a slumber party, and was utterly unprepared for it. Yep, and I was never the same.
The novel was quickly loved by critics and fans alike, getting many awards and constant praise. It garnered attention by Warner and they wanted a movie of it, eventually getting the directorship of a newer director named Mike Flanagan. Mike's previous works includes Hush, Oculus, the sequel that was better than the original Ouija, the critically acclaimed Netflix show Haunting on the Hill House, and another King adaptation, Gerald's Game. Mike loved the novel and Kubrick's original film, and wanted to try and make this movie both an adaptation to the novel and a sequel to that film. He wanted to do this because commercial audiences know and love Kubrick's film. It's often credited as one of the best movies of all time. King, while still having very mixed feelings for that film, was okay with this because Mike had a plan and he trusted that plan. So the two worked together on making this film and worked hard. King absolutely loved the movie and was ready to let it be released. The movie has two releases, the original theatrical version and the director's cut, that was included with the Blu-ray. We'll be looking at the differences in the director's cut since it's more true to the original vision of the movie. The movie mostly stays with the general outline of the novel while doing some very big and very small changes. It opens with a camp where a family is staying at, a little girl meeting a woman by a river. This is Rose the Hat, and she's gonna do some magic, like making the little girl disappear.
Violet!
Following this is where the book originally opened, with Miss Maisie and Dick. The main difference is that Dick is dead because of the shining, so he comes to Dan as a ghost. Years after, in the year 2011, Dan awakes in the bed of a random woman. Realizing he hit rock bottom, he goes to Fraser, New Hampshire, and meets Billy, who introduces him to AA and gets him his job and place. Dan works at the hospice and gains the nickname Dr. Sleep due to him helping a dying man find peace in death. He starts talking to Abra, who was kind of picked up years earlier when she used her powers in a strong way when she was a kid at a birthday party. 2019 rolls around and the True Knot is starving, since it's being harder to pick up steam and find a good supply of it. They pick up a young baseball player named Bradley Trevor and brutally torture and murder the young boy. Abra accidentally finds herself watching this happen and becomes terrified, contacting Danny and telling him about it happening. This causes Rose to pay attention to Abra and carefully watch her, thinking she'd be a good asset one day. Abra meets up with Dan and tells him all about Bradley and that he should go down and grab the baseball glove to help them find out about the knot. So Dan reluctantly goes down with Billy after a talk with Ghost Dick and...
I gotta tell you, Dano, I don't know whether I hope you're right or wrong about this. I mean, if you're wrong, my friend is crazy. I mean, full-blown mental breakdown, imaginary monsters killing imaginary kids. Bonkers. If you're right, though, it's much worse.
Finds both the body and the glove. When Danny returns, he is confronted by Abra's dad.
Your Uncle Dan? The fuck you think you are? Sir. She's 13 years old!
And is told about everything and anything that has been happening. All the while, Rose and the True Knot plan on kidnapping Abra to get her steam after a member dies. The same one who dies in the book, but instead of the measles, it's starvation. They hatch a plan, but instead of Dan, Abra's dad, and John fighting, it's just Dan and Billy. A large difference is the fact that Abra's doctor plays a much less big part in the story, only really being there during the AA meetings. Abra's dad stays behind protecting his daughter, while Dan and Billy go to attack the True Knot. The plan succeeds with them ambushing the Knot and killing all of them. The problem lies when Snakebite Andy tells Billy to kill himself, causing him to do just that. Crow Daddy shows up at Abra's house and drugs her. Her father tries to stop him, but is killed for his efforts. Finding his best friend and Abra's father dead, Dan returns to his apartment and is almost ready to drink again until he tries to reach Abra. He does and aids her in killing her captor in a car accident. Rose appears before her and Abra tells her to meet her in a dark place, the Overlook. Dan meets Abra at a motel, and both of them go down to Colorado for the Overlook. Here we get a lot of homages to the original movie, such as the iconic opening of the movie and recreating multiple scenes shown in flashbacks. When Dan arrives, he does a tour of the entire building, shows us the hallways, the original room, and the infamous Here's Johnny door. Dan eventually ends up at the bar and talks to Lloyd, the barman, who looks a lot like Jack Torrance. This scene is easily the best part of the entire film, creating an emotional and intense scene for Danny to confront his past and really grow as a character and a person. Shortly after, Rose arrives and confronts Dan and Abra, who send her into Dan's mind, which is a recreation of the hedge maze filled with lockboxes. Abra and Rose fight a little and have a conversation in the snowy landscape, eventually being thrown out of it. Rose goes to attack Dan and talks to him about the knot and how they would have loved him, eventually hurting him and taking some of steam from him. Dan finally lets out the ghost of the Overlook, taking Rose by surprise, and they attack her, killing her while taking her steam. Once they run out of Rose to eat, they move to Dan, taking over his body, akin to what happened to Jack, and he chases after Abra to kill her and take her steam. Ending up in the famous room of 237, Abra does what happens in the original Shining novel and talks to Dan, revealing that he made it so that the boiler room will burst. The ghosts rush Dan down to the boiler room to stop it while Abra runs out of the hotel. Dan stops them and sits down. The spirit of Wendy shows up to comfort Dan while the original ending of The Shining plays out, killing Dan and the Overlook once and for all. We end up in Abra's room while the spirit of Dan talks to her. Her mother talks to her, and Abra explains that both Uncle Danny and her dad are happy where they are. The movie ends just like it began, with Abra confronting Miss Macy.
By taking Dan Torrance's story as a grown-up and filtering it through his own large heart, Mike has been able to take the Kubrick movie a step further.
The movie was met with decent reception from critics, but overwhelming love from the fans, calling it a fantastic movie that shows the love for both The Shining and Dr. Sleep. Although the movie doesn't do great in the box office, causing an unsure future for Flanagan Run projects of The Shining, a series focused on the Overlook made by J.J. Abrams was ordered for the streaming service HBO Max. Not much is known about it other than the fact that it will maybe focus on the past and origins of the infamous hotel. Personally, I absolutely loved the movie. The cast was phenomenal, with amazing performances by Ewan McGregor and upcoming actor Kylie Curran, who kill it as Danny and Abra. Mike Flanagan obviously loved the novel and just wanted to show his love for it while also trying to follow up The Shining. King loved the movie and adored working with Mike, and it shows in the interviews about the movie. Thank you for watching this month's What Is. I hope you enjoyed and you drop a like down below and maybe comment your thoughts. And hey, if you're new, why don't you subscribe and watch my other video? And I hope you look forward to all my future videos. Alright everyone, good night, goodbye, and stay spooky, my friends.